Hello, now I'm going to introduce for you the third episode of my book from the strategic communication of the United States of America from Venezuela to Ukraine. The Ukraine Provocation, Synchronizing of the Time and Actions and the International Arena. A provocation of strategic nature, and exactly such is a sequence of actions aimed at destabilizing of the situation in Ukraine, has a limit of time, is synchronized at a global level, and also has a certain similarity in the means and methods to achieve the goals. The time for provocation was selected not accidentally. As several months prior to the Olympic Games, the hands of the Russian government were tied with the oncoming event of the global scale. From the perspective of development of the situation in Ukraine itself, the regime of Viktor Yanukovych was already sufficiently discredited in the eyes of its population, with unpopular decisions that led to the objective possibility of the development of social protest. At a certain stage, it was skillfully transferred to the plane of military opposition against the authorities in Kiev, and in the West with synchronous interaction of provocators in governmental structures with ultra-nationalist and neo-Nazi groups. At a large scale, the temporal scope of the provocation was reasoned with aggravation of various economic and political contradictions in the international arena. With this, the ratio of forces is gradually but obviously changing, not to the benefit of the governmental circles of the USA. The US, the world's largest economy since the 80s of the 19th century, is on the verge of losing its status and is likely to slip behind China this year, says the International Comparison Program, part of the World Bank. China has already overtaken the US as the world's largest trading nation and manufacturer. Synchronizing of actions in various regions of the world during the period of Olympic Games in Sochi on February 6 to 23, 2014, and soon after their completion. Ukraine. Protests at the Maidan were started on November the 21st, 2013, in response to the suspension of the preparation to signing the agreement of association between Ukraine and the European Union by the Ukrainian government. The agreement on settlement of the political crisis in Ukraine was signed after mediation of the European Union and Russia after negotiations between President Yanukovych with the opposition on February 21st. However, the right sector did not accept the terms of the agreement and claimed the continuation of the national revolution and struggle against the criminal regime. In the situation of the continued direct pressure, Viktor Yanukovych leaves Kiev. The Supreme Rada adopted the resolution which stated that Mr. Yanukovych withdrew from the exercise of the constitutional authority with the unconstitutional manner and did not perform his obligations under the pressure of the right sector and other radical nationalists and neo-Nazis on February 22nd, and called for early presidential elections on May 25, 2014. The authority is taken over by the opposition. Thus, we have seen that the peak of coup has taken place during the period of Olympic Games in Sochi. What's happening in Venezuela? What happened in Venezuela those days? Civil unrest started in Venezuela on February 4th, 2014. The peak of the riot took place on February the 12th, when the National Day of the Youth was celebrated in the country. The use of the means of the pressure from the opposition, including Molotov cocktails, well familiar during the events in Kiev, and the national campaign in commercial mass media to support protests against the Nicolas Maduro's government, and the active role of the USA, makes the events in this Latin American country look like the situation in Ukraine. After completion of the Olympic Games, slow decrease in civil unrest was observed, as well as repeated aggravation of the situation, with aggravation of the situation in the east of Ukraine. China. On March 1st, a group of 10 men armed with knives 60 to 70 centimeters long, in masks and similar black clothes, entered the railway station and assaulted passengers near ticket offices and at the square at the railway station of Kunming on March the 1st at about 9 p.m. As a result, 29 people were killed and 143 people were wounded by 6 a.m. on March the 2nd. This tragedy has become the biggest terrorist act in China since 1998 in the amount of victims. The terrorist act in Kunming was planned and performed by Uyghur separatists. According to some witnesses, in 2001, radical Uyghur Muslims were paid by the CIA. They were armed by the US. These Chinese Muslims from Xinjiang, the most western province. The CIA was going to use them in the event of war with China, just to raise hell there. And they were trained and supported out of Afghanistan, some of them with Osama bin Laden's collaboration. The time of the terrorist attack in Kunming coincided with the discussion of the situation in Ukraine in the Council of Security of Ukraine, which cannot be a simple coincidence. Terrorist action was meant to strongly hinder the Chinese consideration of complex set of circumstances surrounding the referendum in the Crimea and the subsequent transfer of this region of Ukraine to the Russian jurisdiction. However, the subsequent reaction of China has shown that it doesn't possess such forms of pressure. However, they complicate the relationships between China and the USA, which doesn't mean its national interests and the interests of international security of the whole. Another terrible attack of terrorists happened April 30. Just at the very moment of sharpening of the situation in the east of the Ukraine, a new emergency United Nations Security Council meeting devoted to the Ukraine crisis. A bomb and knife attack at a railway station in China's western Xinjiang's region has killed 3 and injured 79 other people. Very important clarification comes from RUSI. RUSI is the Royal United Service Institute. On its site one can read the following. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, is an independent think tank engaged in cutting-edge defense and security research in the UK. So, according to RUSI, we have seen attacks and problems in Urumqi before, but we haven't seen anything on this scale in quite a while, said Raffaella Pantucci, a senior research fellow with RUSI. I think, he added, the issue is that the problem of attacks in Xinjiang is getting worse. And he told the BBC this fact, adding that he believed incidents were becoming more professional and aimed at larger targets. But it seems the scale and professionalism of the terrorists rose synchronically with the demands of the Ukrainian provocation. Turkey. Synchronizing of the Ukrainian events with the attempts of further destabilization of the situation in the Middle East can also be seen. According to the leaks appeared in the net, as the initiative of the Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Ahmet Davutoglu, the meeting between the head of the Secretariat of the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Feridun Sinirlioglu, Deputy Chief of General Headquarters of Turkish Army Yasar Güler, and the head of Turkish National Intelligence Hakan Fidanon, was held at the Ministry of International Affairs of Turkey on March the 13th. In the course of the talk, Mr. Davutoglu stated that, in the opinion of the Prime Minister Recep Erdogan, a useful opportunity in the situation formed was arranged of the assault at the tomb of Suleiman Shah. The tomb of Suleiman Shah was not accidentally selected as the object for the terroristic act. In accordance with the agreement between France and Turkey, dated 1921, the territory of the tomb, with area of nearly 1 hectare, located deeply in the Syrian territory near Karakosak, has the status of a Turkish enclave. State flags of Turkey are rising over it. There is a Turkish Guard of Honor in the amount of up to a platoon. On August the 5th, 2013, Erdogan stated the following. I cite, it's a quotation. The tomb of Suleiman Shah, the hand and the land around it, It's our territory. We cannot ignore any unfriendly act against the monument, as if it was an attack against our territory, against the territory of the NATO. Each of us knows their duty and will do whatever is necessary. The end of quotation. The scale of the planned operation was compared with entering of the army to the northern Iraq by Mr. Davutoglu. He also expressed the fact that Secretary of State of the USA supported the Turkish intervention and also asked to find a more good-looking excuse for it. And here's what they advised: the explosion of own sacred places. Mr. Davutoglu also complained that the Turkish army didn't enter Syria in 2012, when Damascus was at its weakest state, just like Libya. It was a great scandal in Turkey and outside because of this leak of information. Happened in April. Syria, another country. On March the 17th, 2014, the United States formally notified the Syrian government that it must suspend operations at its embassy in Washington, at its consulates in Michigan and Texas. The move stops short of a formal break of relations, but it bars Syria's envoys in the USA from carrying out diplomatic and consular duties. It's quite natural, if planning some military actions, even without the direct involvement of the USA, Washington cuts the last official channels of communication with Damascus. So the time for compromises has gone away, perhaps. And meanwhile, in the beginning of April, the two Syrian rebel militias, judged moderate in Washington, have took delivery and began using, mostly in the Idlib region, the first advanced US weapon to be deployed in more than 3 years of civil war. Deep files military sources reveal. It is a heavy anti-tank, optically tracked, wire-guided, which is capable of piercing 500 mm thickness of Syrian tank armor and Syrian fortifications at a range of 4 kilometers. The appearance of this advanced missile radically aims to alter the balance of strength on the Syrian battlefield. Russia. The so-called liberal opposition there broke up with not senseless historical heritage of liberalism long ago. It is closely connected with the oligarchic circles and is ready to fight for freedom together with neo-Nazis, judging by support of the government in Kiev. With that, the assessments are given almost the bottom, similar to the most odious estimates from the NATO headquarters. And alas, the point of view of the liberals doesn't only coincide with the official position of Washington, D.C., but it also fabricated there, and the leaders of the liberal position just pronounce it. This unfortunate fact for it is actually recognized on the pages of the famous New Republic American Liberal magazine by Rosrock. When the US published its quotation, its sanction against Russian elites, it bungled the timing. The list was made public just hours after a widely read op in the New York Times by none other than Alexei Navalny. That article, How to Punish Putin, named all 4 of the men the Treasury Department identified as members of the inner circle and called for the US to sanction them. Navalny's supporter joked about the coincidence, but the political fallout was terrible for the Russian opposition, already considered fifth column inside Russia. It looked to really be working hand in glove with the American government. The end of quotation. The methods of this provocation are street struggle transferred into the armed clashes with the government, as well as professional arrangement of blood victims of repressions. It includes involvement of snipers in the course of opposition at the Maidan in Kiev and the practice of so-called unmotivated homiciders, blind shooting at passerbys in Caracas, fabrication of first mass victims of Bashar Assad's regime, displayed by the majority of global commercial mass media. It also includes the corresponding policy of unions, forming unions with theocratic monarchies and armed religious fanatics in the Middle East, reactionary circles in Venezuela and Ukraine, including evidently neo-Nazi elements. Massive and more primitive propaganda at the global level is used, and sometimes it is rougher than in the period of Cold War, and is accompanied with economic pressure up to the introduction of sanctions against Russia, limited for now. Thus, the interconnection between the events in various regions of the world with the important, though not evident, role of Washington DC can be easily observed, without one should not simplify everything to the actions of the USA. We shall continue. Thank you.